Oh, beautiful. So people are just, we have a lot of people on this call today. It's really awesome. About 1,300 people signed up for this call. So there's obviously some good interest in where we are in the universe and the macrocosm to the microcosm. Um, yeah, please do let us know where you're from. This is so nice. Rhode Island. I know there's Toronto in there and Phoenix and just drop in and let us know where you're from. Alaska, the UK, New Jersey, Montreal, bonjour. Portland, Oregon, New York City, Boulder, Colorado, Long Beach, Italy, New Zealand, Oklahoma City, Denver. Awesome. Toulouse, France. Wow. Thank you. Everybody's just, I can't even read it that quickly. Somebody knows my mom. So here we are today. This is so nice. Ireland and Morocco, Netherlands. So this is great. So I know that I think there's only a limit of how many people can actually come on to the Zoom call with us at 500, but we've got live, we're going live on YouTube. And this is the first time that Jonathan Quintin and I, who have been longtime friends for about 10 years now, I think, have a chance to actually share what we talk about and geek out about all the time. And I think I can speak on behalf of both of us to say that it's really nice to have such a wonderful communal conversation. I know for me, I don't usually sit around and chat fractals with my friends. So it's really nice to be able to have everyone here. So welcome, Jonathan, from New Zealand on a Tuesday morning.
Good
Thanks for coming in.
morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you happen to be. And it's very nice to be here. Very nice to be here with you, Meredith. Excuse me, just getting over a cold. And it's so nice to see people from all over the place. I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to sharing. And how
Hmm.
would you like to start this, Meredith?
Well, I know that somebody just mentioned that my sound isn't very good, so I just turned it up. Can you guys let me know it's better? Yeah. Okay. Is it too loud or is it okay? Just let me know. Ontario, Canada. That's open. It's great. Okay, good. Thank you. So I got like 6 pages of questions from people. Thank you so much for writing in. We're also going to do live Q&A today as well. So the wonderful David Hyam of the Resonant Science Foundation is in the background there. If you want to chat, well, you know where to chat, and just make sure that you're saying it to everyone or panelists. And if you have any questions that come up as we're talking, just hit the Q&A little thing on the bottom of the screen there. And that's where to ask your questions. And David will be overseeing them. And then after we've gone through, we've got a lot to cover. It's exciting. And we might even do this monthly. We'll just see what serves. We're going to bring a poll on later on because we have a few questions for you just to see what's of interest to you. And so first I thought we'd start before we jump into the questions right away, which we will do in a moment. I thought it would be good because not everybody knows who we are or why we do this, where we met and why we talk about stuff like this all the time. So Jonathan's going to give you a little bit of a history about what he does and why, and then I'll do the same, and then we will launch into all these awesome questions that you guys asked. Hit it, Jonathan.
Okay. Okay, well, I should explain right at the beginning that my brand of geometry wasn't learnt in the classroom because I went through my entire school years undiagnosed dyslexic and Asperger's and some other stuff and didn't fit in so well. And from memory, I can't ever remember having passed a single math test when I was in school.
Me
It was
either.
only when I was out of school, that's when my real education began. And then when my travels began, my overseas travels, at the age of 21, I went exploring dozens of different countries, visiting ancient civilizations and experiencing all the different cultures, and fell in love with mosaics, with Islamic mosaics. And that was a very pivotal point in my life when I first experienced these. And then over the years, I had a very strong interest in it. But it was in 1986 that I started my full-time studies and exploration and experimentation of sacred geometry. And it wasn't through the mind of a mathematician, it was through the heart and soul of an artist, because that's what attracted me to it to begin with, was the beauty. And this started as a child, just adoring the beautiful shapes and forms and patterns in nature, and seeing the connectivity that crossed over through all these different systems. I was totally fascinated by this. I didn't learn anything in the classroom, but nature was my teacher. And I chose the wisdom of nature as the way to learn. And so since 1986, I've been involved in the full-time exploration, experimentation, and sharing of sacred geometry. And I've given talks all over the world. The question I am most asked is, well, it's a double question. What's the difference between sacred geometry and regular geometry? And what's in it for me? What can I get from it?
Jonathan, do you mind if we actually hold that as your first question? Because that is one of my first questions here.
Oh, okay.
Is that okay? Or yeah. Do you want to? And we'll just do like a really quick intro of each of us, and then go into the questions.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. You take a little intro now, and then I'll go, and I've got some visuals, so I'll share my screen. I'll follow with that. Yeah.
Can you both talk about why you're here in the Resonance Academy and what your work has to do with Nassim? Yeah. So I failed math in high school. I love letting people know that because I think it's important. Just like Jonathan is self-taught and autodidact, so am I. And so I was raised in body work. I was raised by a mother who's a very well-known dancer in Canada, and created something called somatic stretch, which will come up later as I'm sharing how I've learned about geometry in the body. And that's a lineage from my grandfather to my mother to me. So I've got doctors in the family and different things. So I had that in my environment. But I was more interested in traveling and seeing the world and trying to learn some languages, and then discovered, to make a longer story short, that while I was traveling, I actually do the same thing as where I come from. So I was in shiatsu and then later acupuncture school in Canada. And it was during that time that I had a really powerful experience that ended up really increasing my sensory awareness. And I started feeling things in the body, which led me on a very, very long journey, which has been 25 years now already, of understanding what I was feeling and trying to make it make sense with what I was learning in both Western and Eastern medical philosophies, theories, and systems. And I remember the day that I discovered I was looking at geometry, and I'll talk about what that means too when we get into it. But I was really frustrated because I don't know math. Like, it's the least that I just never know math, no numbers. Anyone who knows me knows that I just suck with numbers. And so it's visuals and sensory awareness that create visuals, and therefore create a real link between the left and right brains, or the subconscious and conscious mind. And I realized when I saw geometry that I was at a dead end, because it was just the worst thing possible to lead me into. And I was really frustrated. It had been about 15 years in, and I'd finally created this understanding of planes. And I was like, wow, it's geometry. And how am I ever going to learn about that? And I really gave up. I really felt really frustrated. Like, well, that was an interesting journey. Whereupon I met Jonathan, because he travels and gives really wonderful talks on geometry, and he creates wonderful things with lights, and he does a lot of stuff I'm sure he'll share with you. And I was in Southern California at the time, and he was giving a talk, and I went with a friend, and I was so excited that I jumped up at the end of the talk and practically grabbed him by the lapels and said, I love what you do. And I work with the body, and I wanted to just sit down and chat with him. And I said, do you know the work of Nassim Haramein? Because I'm seeing that in the cosmos. And he laughed and he said, yeah, we're like extremely good friends and have known each other for years. So that began my understanding, because Jonathan gave me a lot of the language for me to understand as did Marshall Lefferts when I met him. And so people started showing up in my life to give me the language that explained what I was really seeing in the body outside of the confines of Eastern medical terminology or even Western. So Jonathan and I have been friends for, I don't know, at least 10 years now. And our connection with the Resonance Science Foundation, because somebody asked, is Jonathan, and Nissim's known Jonathan's amazing work for years and has wanted him as soon as he had a program out to be able to share it with all of you. And because he had electives up in order to look at what's going on in the world of geometry, my work is specifically around the body and the geometry of healing. And so I'm an elective on it, and that's how we're all connected. That's the story. So Jonathan, why don't you, the first question that I was going to ask you that somebody wrote in was, what makes something considered to be sacred geometry? What specifically qualifies it as sacred or cosmological? Isn't all geometry the same in essence?
No, not all geometry is the same. All geometry in nature is the same, but then we have our own brand of geometry for, you know, building and utilities and other such things that aren't necessarily related or resonant with this sacred geometry, what we call sacred geometry. It's just a word. And actually it was popularized in the late 1970s by Robert Lawler in Tasmania. In his book, he wrote Sacred Geometry, and that was when it made it into the public arena, and it took on, it took off, and it spread, and it's widely accepted now, and it's used to distinguish the geometry that is resonant with cosmos, with universal order, that is representative of natural laws, and that we ourselves are an embodiment of and contain the same geometries, the same ratios and proportions, and other features that are found throughout all of creation. And sacred geometry is the field, is the area where we can study this and connect with this. And in fact, I'm just leading into, you know, how to do this. And that is, I'm going to share screen in a moment. It's about visualization, because the question, what can it do for me? It's not so much what can it do for you. It's about what you put into it. What you put in and who you are and give is what you get back from it. And I'll talk about this when, along with the visuals. Where did I put it? And it's about the principle of visualization. I have to come out of here. How do I turn my video off because it's using too much band?
Bottom left on the Zoom call. Left on the Zoom call. I think David can do it too.
Oh, yeah, great. Perfect. Thanks.
There we go.
Thanks,
Okay.
David. Right. So visualization is the language of light. And here's something that not a lot of people actually realize, is that you don't see with your eyes. You think, well, of course I see with my eyes. You don't see with your eyes. You see with your mind. Think about it. When you're dreaming, let's say you're dreaming about your pet turtle. Or was that a tortoise? I'm not sure. And the imagery that you are dreaming is the same as the turtle in real life. But your eyes are closed, yet you can see. You can see this imagery as if it were the same imagery that you see when you're awake, but your eyes are closed. This tells us that something else is going on. Your eye is just an instrument to convey the language of light. And what happens, let's say in this example, there is a bluebird in your field of vision, and you can't see that bluebird. You can see it, but you can't see that bluebird, that flesh and blood physical form bluebird. For one thing, because it's 99.999% space. But that 0.0001% of matter, it does a lot of work. It spins really quickly, so fast in fact, that light can't penetrate through it. Light reflects off it, is bounced off it. So there's a source of light. It illuminates the subject, the bluebird in your field of vision. And the light is reflected off the bluebird, but this time now is carrying information of the bluebird about its shape and color and form and movement and many other things. And this information in the form of these light waves passes through the iris and the pupil and onto the lens, where it is projected, inverted and projected to the back of the eye, the retina, which is a membrane that has millions and millions of light sensitive nerve endings that respond to this light as it's reflected upon it by pulsating and generating these neuroelectrical charges. These are the rods and cones. And when the light projects upon them, they pulsate, generating these neuroelectric charges that pass along the optical nerve through the geniculate nucleus to the back of the head, the occipital lobe, where this binary coded information in the form of charges, neurocharges, is reconstituted, is processed to simulate, to recreate the image that was in your field of view. Now, the reason I went through all of that is that's the principle. You don't see something, you create it in your mind. That's how you experience it. So if you're looking at a bluebird, you think you see a bluebird. But what if instead of a bluebird, what if it is a geometric harmonic principle or template? Something that represents, that illustrates universal laws that guide the self-organizing forces of nature. And as you're looking at it, you are recreating in your occipital lobe the very same image that is reflected to you for you to do the work and recreate it and simulate it. And in the process of doing so, your mind, your brain is applying the same mathematical principles that are required to produce these geometries. And the more you do it in an intentional and purposeful and mindful way, the more the neuro pathways that all of this is forging in your brain is going to take root and is going to establish itself into your consciousness, into your brain and your consciousness, so that your mind, as it plays out inside your cranium, experiencing these geometries, is reverberating to this universal order, because it's the same principles are at play. The geometries are like keys that can help to attune your individual consciousness. Your energetic field can help attune it to the harmony of universal order. Everything you are seeing here is relevant and purposeful and illustrates the guiding principles of creation and natural order. And each one is a portal that opens our consciousness on the level of our consciousness, that opens us up to this universal order, this infinite, unending, omniscient, pre-existing, and will forever exist geometry. And it can all be captured in the circle. Here we have 5 upright isosceles triangles and 4 inverted. No, it's the other way around, 5 inverted, 4 upright. Overlapping to make 43 smaller triangles forming the Sri Yantra. Transforming here to 43 circles, the flower of life. And on it goes, inside the circle, source of undifferentiated potential, through which endless, limitless shapes and patterns can be described in perfect order, perfect connectivity, all aligned to a higher order. And as you look at it, as you recreate it in your mind's eye, you are bringing yourself closer, because you are creating a relationship with this. And there we
Beautiful.
go. Okay, I need David to turn my video back on. Thanks, David. Thank you.
So I'm going to just thank you for that beautiful visual. I want to answer the question a little bit from the point of view of that what I'm going to be showing a little bit through my visuals is the idea when people say, like, what is sacred geometry? I feel like if you wanted to leave a message for people in the future that surpassed cultures and languages, symbol is the best way to do it. And I think that geometry is just a tool for the human mind to witness the invisible in action. So if we could see all of the internet rays and the cosmic rays and the different kinds of rays that are here, geometry is an ancient way. I mean, it's in so many historical places in Egypt and in different kinds of things. And it's just frequency. It's a way of saying your world is made of frequency. And here are the stamps and the colors of it. If you wanted to try to explain to somebody what light was, how do you hold and grab onto a light beam for a second and give somebody an idea of it? And so even when we draw the sun as children, it's a little circle with little straight lines, right? That's like a symbol of a lot larger of a perspective. So I feel that what we're doing in understanding not only what geometry is and why we would call it sacred because it's hidden. It's something that you can't easily see. And yet we see in so many different ways, as Jonathan was pointing out by showing us how the eye works. And so there's the challenge, and I'm seeing it in the questions too, that either come to me through email or that came to me for this talk, is allowing our minds to actually think of a couple of different things. Like, for instance, one question was, what is geometry written on? This comes from Vicky in Toronto. Thank you, Vicky. What is the geometry written on? What is the nature fabric of the medium on which it is written? So I know Jonathan's going to answer this. I want to just say that I was thinking about this last night. And to me, it's kind of like saying, what are the waves written on in the ocean? You can't separate the ocean from the waves that it's creating. And yet we're so used to thinking, here's wave, here's ocean. What is actually the medium of the wave? And so we're learning how to not think in pieces. And you're going to hear how that comes up a lot in the questions, where it seems very rational and linear, what we're asking, but in fact, it's the brain learning how to combine the left and the right ways of seeing. We don't look at the night sky and just see blotches on black paper. We have an ability to see distance, and we're using both sides of the brain. And it's Jonathan who taught me that geometry is the one mathematical science that really actively uses both sides of the brain. So, Jonathan, what would you say to what is geometry written on, and what is the nature or fabric of the medium on which it is written?
It's written, it's not written, it exists as a state of potential on the archetypal planes in the cosmos and the ethers. And as I briefly mentioned in the visuals I showed about the circle is the cosmic womb. And it's just a symbol, but it's a fractal. And it's a fractal that contains all of the laws that you know we find throughout creation. And these laws are determined through the division of the circle reflecting upon itself and creating these polygons and interangular relationships and ratios and proportions and meridians and root powers and all sorts of mathematical processes are generated from it. So just space, anywhere, any point, you can take any point in space, make it any size as a circle, and you can get all of the geometries that I showed and many more, infinite amount more, derives from the circle or related directly to the circle. And so what is it written upon? It's not actually written per se. It's there to be uncovered. And that's what I did. And Meredith, if you asked if I was going to tell about the stone to the head, it sort of, this brings it to that. I've been at this over 35 years full time. Seems longer, but I think it's about that. And I've had watershed experiences along the way, and even maybe perhaps a stronger metaphor is required. For the most significant one, if I was to mention a most significant experience that got me, you know, where I am today, it was when I got stoned. And let me explain that. I was riding my motorbike. This was in the 90s, in the early 90s. I was riding my motorbike along a country road, an unsealed, gravelly country road. And I was following a car who was going too fast. And I entered this strange state. It was like watching a movie slow down and go, you know, through slow motion. So every single moment is exaggerated. And anyway, I saw this scenario. I saw this stone, this rock, sitting at the edge of a curve. And I could see through the triangulation of that rock and the car ahead of me, its rear tire, and the brow center of my forehead made a triangle. And in this altered state, I was able to triangulate and through the trigonometry and that and see and calculate and not a split second, more like 100th of a split second, calculate that the trajectory of that stone and the trajectory of my brow were going to meet at a certain point, at point X in space, if things went, you know, unaltered, because I knew there's choice for me. I can avoid it, I can not avoid it. And I had 100th of a split second to decide. I said, okay, yes. And saw this projectile come hurtling towards me, and I had an open-faced helmet on. I tilted a fraction. The rock struck the rim of my helmet and ricocheted off that and struck me right between the eyes. And my consciousness just exploded into this massive, brilliant white light. And I lost all sense of self and non-self and anything else. Yeah, it was just this oneness. And also there was like a whoosh as I saw thousands, millions of geometries of stars and pentagons and triangles and that just go through my consciousness. And it seemed to last for such a long time, only it can only have been another split second before I regained consciousness, fortunately, on a moving motorbike, and conscious enough to bring the bike to a stop. And anyway, long story short, as a result of that, I was able to, under certain circumstances, revisit that experience, but instead of the geometries going like that, I could freeze frame them. And then this is in the 90s, before personal computers. So I did all by hand and freeze frame a particular pattern and then work out from scratch how to reproduce it. And that's how I became a mathematician, was by, having something so fascinating to me. I had to find a way, to bring it from where it was. I was drawing it from the ethers. That's where it was written upon. And it's there for everyone. The geometer's task is, as facilitator, is a conduit from that realm to this realm, so that we can engage with these geometries, form a relationship with them, be a part of them, and they be a part of us and our life.
Brilliant. Great. That's Jonathan's true story of how it all began.
Well, it began
Sharing
before,
that.
but
I was
that
like, "Are you
was
going to share it?" And he was like, "I don't know." So I'm glad he did. So there is one question actually up in the Q&A that I'm going to respond to because it connects with one of my next questions, because we're trying to define here at the beginning of the call really what sacred geometry is, why it's called sacred, what it has to do with the universe, what it has to do with us. And somebody did ask, what does it have to do with Nassim's work? And I do want to respond to that because Nassim's realm is physics and the cosmos and defining the unified field theory between relativity and the quantum world, which is the um, what's it called? It's the pièce de résistance for all of us really, but for physicists to try to understand how the atoms and your sweater come together, basically. And so the way that it's connected, Jonathan explains it in a very visual way, and I explain it in through the body, and it's connected because we're talking about frequency. And we've been so trained to think in pieces. And because we can't see the connection, if we dissolved our body, I'm going to be talking with the visuals in my things about how you can really it's like the physical form is like tissue paper. And the whole inner core of the brain, the spinal cord, and all the peripheral nerves, and my nervous system talking to your nervous system talking to itself, which is like a really trippy acid trip right there. It's all just frequency. And so, of course, it goes beyond the body and it goes beyond the body. And in that way, we're all connected. And that's Nassim's point, is using physics to prove that we're all connected. If all atoms are existing in everything and nothing is touching anything and all things are just in vibration, how can we not be connected to the universe? And so there are many different ways of talking about geometry, from the very linear mathematical to the quantum and physics world. And Jonathan expresses it through art, and I express it through art and also medical theory in the body, to understand how we could possibly have neural frequency as being an indication as to how we're connected. So there's a new field called quantum biology, which is basically the idea that, oh my God, is what we're finding in the universe actually have something to do with the body? Like, of course it would have to. And yet quantum biology is still considered a very fringe field. And I understand quantum biologists are a little bit hush hush about the fact that that's what they're pursuing, because it still seems so weird. We know we have to be connected to nature, but for some reason our brains don't like that. So it's connected in Nassim's work in so much as what he's doing in the cosmos and what Jonathan sees in the cosmos and explains through his beautiful program of universal order can also be seen in the body, because all is frequency and we can't separate ourselves from that. So the fractal question that I wanted to ask, somebody had asked in the Q&A, Michael had asked, how can we best understand the relationship between sacred geometry and fractals? Are they the same or different? And Jane from Scotland had also emailed a question saying, where does the fractal of the body meet the fractal of the universe? Is there an edge or boundary? So we're going to riff on that for a second. I'm just going to say first, before we turn it over to Jonathan, that a fractal is just a pattern. You're going to see this more in the visuals too. I'm going to explain more of it, but it's a pattern that repeats itself at different scales. So once you have a geometry, it will fractalize out. Jonathan will explain that more, and I will show that in some visuals in relation to the body later. So just remember that it's like Russian dolls, right? Once you have one, it doesn't matter if it's really small, or I've heard Nassim say many times, people coming out of people is the ultimate fractal, right? So you're looking at the very small to the very large. And one thing that I found fascinating when I was researching a lot and putting my program in fractal anatomy and the geometry of healing together, which is on the Resonant Science platform alongside Jonathan's, that chaos theory, that the easiest way, the simplistic way to describe chaos theory is like, we understand everything out to here, and then beyond that, it's chaos. Like super simple. Sorry if I offend anybody by making it a little bit too simple. But basically, there's this zone where patterns, that things just don't make sense. But when we can oversee, we even see this in tumors in cancer, it looks like blood will just start to form its own little story over here, and they can't figure it out. But when they pull back and they can really see pattern, they see a fractal relationship. We're seeing ultimate pattern repeating itself if we pull out enough. Little bit complex, but kind of the simplest version of that. And where Jane asks, is there an edge or the boundary between where the fractal of the body meet the fractal of the universe? What's so interesting is that when we get into this realm of what we call chaos that we don't understand, fractals are the images of chaos. So they actually do have their own patterns that repeat. And we're just learning, this is something the East has known for thousands of years. They call it was pattern thinking. They called it Li. And that's the whole way when we're trained in acupuncture to actually think, even though we're trained so linearly, sometimes we miss the point. But when the body started showing me the very fractal nature of how things can be, like your eye or your ear or your hand can be a mirror of the body, the whole body can be a mirror of the body if you know how to read it that way. We're learning to think in patterns. So I'm going to pass that to you. And I've just lost, answered is right here. Sorry.
What are you passing to me?
How can we understand the relationship between sacred geometry and fractals? And is there an edge or the boundary between the fractal and the body and the universe? The fractal of the body and the universe?
Well, there's various fields of geometry. And so the field that I work with, and this is in regards to the question, is the circle starting with the circle and then uniform divisions of the circle. And the shapes that emerge from that. And in order to create the most fundamental elemental shape, the equilateral triangle, requires the circle to divide 3 times in 3 uniform divisions of itself, and then joining those points, giving an equilateral triangle. That's the first most elemental fractal. And that fractal itself, if I had anticipated this question, I could have had visuals to illustrate the point I'm making. But the triangle itself, formed from the circle, can contain limitless numbers of other triangles and the shapes that triangles make, such as hexagons and 6-pointed hexagram stars. And so the triangle itself, and you can see it on my YouTube website. youtube.com/Jonathan Quintin has these visuals that I'm describing right now, is the triangle itself can contain an infinite number of smaller triangles and hexagons and hexagrams and rhomboids, and every one of those shapes perfectly aligned, perfectly connected to the one next to it and before it and after it, and every single one of them itself is a fractal. The triangle itself is a fractal, but any shape that fits harmonically within it is also a fractal. And it's the same for the squares. And it's especially the same for the pentagons. In fact, the pentagons take it to a whole other level. And the pentagons featured primarily in the experience I had with the rock in the head. And I've taken it to quite some extent, and that's at my website, attuned to cosmos.com.
So Jonathan, I'm going to ask you a question about triangles that came up at one point. There was one woman who was talking about having seen triangles and drawing them as an artist, and that they grew into other geometric shapes. And she was saying, is the triangle the basis of physical matter on planet Earth? And what does that mean? And is geometry like a language shared with consciousness? And if so, why choose the triangle or the pyramid or the tetra as the essential part for all matter here on this planet? I remember you telling me before that all geometries break down to the triangle. And in my work, what I've seen is that the trinity, or the three of something, the upper, middle, lower, which I will also show in my visual thing component, the easiest way to understand the fractal nature of the body is in threes, in fact. And so this person is just wondering about the idea of how all geometry is reduced to the triangle, and why is that so significant in her visioning of what's going on.
Yeah, so universal language, the triangle is an element of this universal language, but so too is the square and pentagon and myriad of other polygons and semi-regular polygons, and then polyhedra and semi-regular polyhedra. They're all forms of this language, this universal language that we can use. In fact, the two-dimensional ones, I should add, don't exist two-dimensionally. They are in that form, so we can experience them on a flat screen or a sheet of paper or some such, but they represent three-dimensional and more dimensional. And what was the other part of that question? Oh, the triangles, Right, so we have the circle. The first uniform shape we can get from the circle is the triangle. The next uniform shape we can get is the quadrilateral, also known as the square. And then which is four uniform divisions. 5 uniform divisions gives us the pentagon. And these three shapes, triangle, square, and pentagon, are referred to as the primary shapes, the primary regular polygons. And within them come the other shapes, come the triangle doubles, so that there's an upright triangle and an inverted triangle, which creates the hexagram star. And if you join the points of that star with straight lines, it's a hexagon. And the octagon makes the square makes the octagon, and the pentagon makes the decagon. And then they can go on to further divisions and subdivisions and contractions and extrapolations through the dividing of certain ratios. With the triangle, it's the dividing or the multiplication by √3, which is 1.732. If you have a triangle or a hexagram or whatever it is, and you divide it by 1.732, then you will get a smaller version that fits perfectly within the first one, as a fractal should do. If you multiply it by 1.732, the shape, whatever it is, will surround that current shape perfectly. And you multiply that one by 1.732 and the same process, or you're dividing and it's the same process.
So
Through
Jonathan's
division takes you towards infinite contraction, and multiplication takes you out towards infinite expansion. And that's for the triangle. With the square and the octagon and octagram, then you divide or multiply by √2, which is 1.414. And that will take you towards infinite contraction or out towards infinite expansion. And with the pentagon, then that's my favorite, and that is the golden ratio. You divide or multiply by 1.618, and that will take you towards infinite contraction, but in such a beautiful, profoundly beautiful way, where you
and you
see.
see,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
I was just going to say, because you can see all of this. And Jonathan, David, maybe you can throw up the link to Jonathan's Universal Order program. What he's explaining, he has incredible visuals for in his program. And so if you're interested in the kind of information that he's offering about that, it goes through everything where you can actually see the root ratios that he's talking about, and you can see it visually at the same time. And actually, we should let you know too that our program prices are going up because they've been very low, and so they're going up just a little bit by the end of the week, not a lot. But if you are interested in it, then it's a good time to be able to grab that. I want to just remind people that if you have questions, first of all, always click down to attendees and panelists, because there's a lot of information coming in just to us. And also, if you're asking a question, please put it in the Q&A down on the bottom. Don't put it into the chat, because we have a better chance of missing it. But there are a couple of comments here. And one is, what is the definition of what a geometer is? And it's somebody who works with geometry in one form or another, I would say. And then someone else had said, so are you saying that even if I know nothing about different geometries, when I look at them, am I getting the information and it's in my memory or consciousness? So I know that in the way that I understand frequency and geometry, what's really important about the nervous system is that, as I said, my nervous system is frequency, and it's talking to your nervous system, talking about itself. So when we're looking at geometry and the kind of geometries that Jonathan creates in video and different things, where you can really see them morphing, it's like your nervous system watching itself watch itself. And that, I know that the more that I communicate, and the more my creativity and my intuition accelerates. It seems like my internet connection is now unstable. I hope people heard that. Was that heard, do you think?
I got a bit, but it was only for a couple of seconds. It wasn't anything serious.
Oh, okay. Great. Yeah, mostly. Thanks, John. Yeah, so when you're watching geometry, when you're looking at geometry, it's your nervous system watching itself watch itself. It weaves a connection between, somebody has a question here actually, and I'm going to launch into that a little bit, which is how, when your subconscious mind, my definition of healing is when your subconscious mind is communicating with your conscious mind more. So our subconscious mind is running everything that we don't even understand how to run everything. And when more comes through in dreams or insights or downloads or creative understandings that just drop in, that's the subconscious mind reaching through and talking a little bit more to the conscious mind. And when we're watching geometries, they're allowing the nervous system to watch itself, and that creates a whole circuit. So that's vastly increased my creativity and my intuitive abilities from working that way. And do you want to make a comment on that, Jonathan, before I go into
On what
some questions?
particularly? Make a comment on what particularly?
Just the idea of how because this woman had made a comment about, how are you saying that even though I don't understand geometry, that just by watching it, I'm still getting the information?
Yeah, I'll comment on that. So you get what you put into it, and you get also from who you are, your cultural upbringing, your level of consciousness, your most importantly, your commitment and your intention and purposefulness. That's the most important thing. But the rest, can follow that and be resolved through that. But without your intention, then it won't be nearly as effective, because when you are looking at it intentionally, and Meredith, you touched upon this, the left brain and the right brain, left hemisphere and right hemisphere, are involved. Apparently, from my research, geometry is the only field of mathematics where the left and right hemispheres of the brain are engaged simultaneously. And when they are operating and they come into alignment, like there's a common focus, a common theme that they are focused upon, then there can be a synergy where the whoever it is, if it's me, then the hemispheres merge and there's a synergy, so that 1 and 1 equals more than 2. And of course, if you think about where the crossover point between the two hemispheres is located, is the pineal gland, which is our transformer, our transceiver, our connector to the cosmos, to the greater whole. It receives the information, the vibratory information from cosmos, and it broadcasts who we are. We're like a cicada chirping, rubbing our wings together and sending out our frequency to be joined with, into the symphony of the thousands of other voices there. And so it's more about, I didn't have the mathematical background. I just worked it out one step at a time. I thought of it in terms of animal cunning. I just sniff around here and sniff around there and try and try and try again until something worked and it was obvious. And it sort of just unfolded in that way. And it was with pencil and paper and a compass and a ruler and the protractor, and that was about it. And I drew, thousands of geometries in that way.
There's another question that came in as well of, do you have a method that you use to help to create that bridge between the conscious and subconscious mind? This was asked more as kind of like from a physical healing point of view. And I'll just take a moment to answer that part before I know, I'm sure you have an answer for that too, Jonathan.
Yeah, I do.
So the way that I create the bridge between the conscious and the subconscious mind is through this technique called somatic stretch that I was trained in. So I keep saying that the body taught me what fractals are, and somatic stretch taught me how to use them. And that's what really helped me map out the geometry. So I was raised in teaching since I was a teenager, this technique. I teach free classes online that are solely supported by donation, which I really did after when COVID hit. I felt that people really needed to be more encouraged to work with themselves and strengthen their own immune system and weren't really being encouraged in that direction. And so I've now started teaching twice weekly online. I leave classes up there that people can come and check out. I just put a link in there if you're interested in actually bringing some of this material into your own body and getting healthier and increasing your flexibility and your creativity and your intuition while you're doing it. So that is the tool that I use. It's a lifelong path for me. It's a really powerful practice where it's not really about stretching, it's about relaxing. It's very different. And the other one is meditation. One thing I've learned from the years of working with the body is that as long as we baseline the nervous system goes about doing its wisdom. We don't really need to worry about much, but the level of stress that we carry without realizing it and the levels of tension in the iceberg that we don't recognize are profound. And that's what somatic stretch teaches me to drop more and more. And then when I meditate, I can feel the whole nervous system calming down. And that really creates the bridge between the subconscious and conscious minds. And somebody actually mentioned this morning in an email saying to me, your online somatic stretch classes help to put the teaching you give in your educational program into practice. And that's why in level 2 of my program, I also have an entire system of problems, pains, and solutions is a whole video that I have that I've broken in, where you can understand more about fractals and particular issues in your body. So if you're not interested in the whole program of geometry, you can still get the problems, pains, and solutions on my website at geometryofhealing.com. And so I give a lot of stuff away, and then I also do a lot of training in somatic stretch, and that would be my bridge. What's your bridge, Jonathan? Or how would you
Okay,
describe
so
it?
what was the original question?
The original question is, do you have a method that you use to help to create the bridge between the conscious and subconscious mind?
I have several, and they're all to bring you to a point where you can look at this geometry, whether it's the flower of life, the macabre, the tree of life, the Sri Yantra, or other, harmonics, templates, to the point where you can close your eyes and it's there, the image is there, and all of its detail is there in your consciousness, because that's where the power is. The power isn't in the painting. It isn't in watching a video. It's not an pendant. They do to a certain degree. They hold a particular geometry by virtue of their shape. But that's not where the power is. The power is inside your cranium. And
Mm.
where these geometries, how these geometries are featured inside your consciousness, inside your awareness. So I think one of the previous questions was, I don't have a mathematical background. Can I still experience, does my mind, my consciousness understand what it is seeing? It does. And the best way, the absolute best way to integrate these geometries into your consciousness is by drawing them, by creating them out of nothing. And with nothing more than, a compass and a ruler and little else, to out of nothing create these harmonic geometric templates. It's an achievement, and it's a holistic experience, because you're engaging with these geometries physically, physiologically, through the kinetic, movements of your body. Your body, your hand is following these same processes, these same pathways, these harmonic pathways. It's joining these same points, and it's enmeshing this information more effectively upon your consciousness when you see it come from out of nothing into something, into what it is, and you did it. It's there because it's part of a process that of your creative process. You have birthed it, and it has much more significance to you. And in my course, like, if I don't have a mathematical background, my course is designed for people who don't have mathematical backgrounds. It's designed originally for dyslexics and people, who didn't stand a chance in the classroom, in the way that geometry and mathematics is taught in the classroom. But when you experience it from the grassroots level, where it makes sense, and you see more of it, and I include, the universal order expressed through numbers. That's a good place to start. Is, number relationships can give us very tangible experience of this order in its most elemental form, experience of relationship of numbers, being its relationship of images and forms and other things that are quantitatively express evidence of an order, of a higher, really profound order. Did I answer the question?
Sure.
Oh.
I think maybe what I'm going to do is because we're already at an hour, so I'm going to do a little bit of a visual presentation, because some of the
Yeah,
questions that come in are
yeah.
really like, how do you do this on yourself? So I'm recognizing that a lot of people asking the questions, some people know my program and the idea, or Jonathan's, and some people don't. So and it's always good to have a a refresher because there's a lot of information in our programs. There is one question that Michael also asked her about: how does Rupert Sheldrake's concept of morphic resonance relate? That is, do these quantum fluctuation waves carry the information in the form of sacred geometry such that in turn informs our physics, chemistry, and biological health? A great question. And again, something that asks how one ocean is dividing waves up in a certain way. So Sheldrake's morphic resonance is really kind of a concept around understanding that there's really almost like, I mean, I guess to simplify it, like recording tapes where there's information on it that then species know how to just recreate themselves. And I think I'm hoping that in the visual presentation that I'm about to show that you'll get more of an idea of how all of it is together. Now, what I see in the body, for instance, somebody asked questions about distance work. I grew up on the East Coast and I've lived a lot on the West Coast. I get very schizophrenic about where I'm supposed to be feeling what. So distance work to me was a really weird concept, and I didn't really want anything to do with it. And then it just started happening many years ago. And then I had to accept that it's really true. Now, the way that I view it is that because I can connect with the sensory system of my body, right? We all have a certain level of sensory awareness. When that increases, you start to feel it in your field. And somebody asked a really good question about that, which hopefully I'll have time to get to, but you can start to really feel your field. And because of that, and because there's really no time and space relationship, once, you know, it's quite possible, and this is a large part of my business actually globally, is closing my eyes and you just connect with the person. Edgar Cayce did this years ago. There's so many different kinds of mediums of different sorts of things. And it's like the nervous system has frequency, and it's almost like locking into a tape cassette that has a certain story that you've imprinted. And that story will give me images, and those images I translate into words and then relay them back to the person that I'm having the session with. And it creates quite an impact, because it's one thing to know something kind of subterranean about yourself, and it's another thing to have somebody who doesn't know you tell you those very things. And then it really kind of hits it's like shining a light in a dark corner where suddenly it's lit up and it's just not dark anymore. And that creates a really strong healing response in the body. So the morphic resonance idea to me are kind of like those tapes that we have information on. But of course, it's not just about humans, it's about the entire planet. So I'm gonna just share my screen, and I tried to make this as concise as possible. And I'm not even going to I'm just going to go through it along the side panels to see where we kind of go with this, in the hopes of creating a brief overview of what my program actually dives into in more detail, but also to just give those who may not be interested in the program an understanding of how this work relates to yourself. So neural resonance therapy is just what I call the way that I teach people who work with bodies in any way how to access the nervous system more directly. The idea is that if you could catch a sunbeam, how many sides would it have? So we have to understand really what we're talking about. From what I've learned from the body is refraction of light. I thought it was just neural frequencies, and then I realized that it's really just light. And then I understood that we don't actually know a lot about am I still here? Yeah, I am. Hold on one second. Sorry, we don't actually know a lot about light, which is really interesting. I thought we did. David, just drop in and let me know in the chat if I'm good. Actually, I can't even see the chat anymore. I assume someone will let me know if it's not. So when we're talking about the body, the idea is that it's really like tissue paper, and there's a lot of energy from the brain and the spinal cord that has a huge amount of electrical conductivity that runs through your entire nervous system. Now, if you actually if you actually look at the nervous system as the idea of frequency and the body as tissue paper, there's a huge amount of electrical information through the body. And if you dissected the entire body and just left the nervous system, you would still see the entire physical form in front of you. That the Great Body Worlds exhibit is really amazing with that, if you've ever seen that. So the idea is that this is the best way for me to describe what I see when I look at a body. And so we're just you're using the basic chakra system, which has its own story, which I won't go into here, but I do in the program. And if you saw that there was energy coming out of it and it kept going, right? Ultimately, it would just be light. But if you're breaking the light up to understand how all of these different rays and planes of light and energy are coming out of the body, moving past the body into the field around you, and then you took that into every point just of chakras, this is how much activity would be happening in the body. And so this is kind of what I see. Now, there was a question that came in about why do you see some planes of energy and lines, and why do you see circles in other ways? And so it's kind of like the line to the wave. And just like in physics, I feel I'm getting a little bit discombobulated because I'm not sure that I'm screening well. David, can you just even let me know on WhatsApp if it's all good? Because I'm feeling disconnected for some reason. So as you kind of keep looking at the body and you look at the frequency like this, imagine if you kept going, it would just be light all around the body. And many people can see the light or see kind of aura connections. Thanks, Leela. So if you consider that this is how we're connected to the cosmos, if you're just looking at frequency, and I'll explain the difference between lines and circles in a minute, but you can even see how centers of energy draw into themselves, and yet they're all connected to everything else. And so in that way, chakras end up looking, this is in a Sims, where you can see how the planets spin is actually, rather than looking at things from 2D, that you're looking at them in spirals. And this is important when I start discussing in the body the idea about the straight lines in relation to spirals. Now, this is John Martineau's work, and you can see how there are straight lines down here. This is how, known as the kiss of Venus, it's how Venus moves around the Earth, or is it how Earth moves around Venus? I think it's how the Earth moves around Venus, and it does these ellipses. So you can see how there's actually circular movement, but that you can draw lines between the dots and it can create straight lines and therefore geometries, and that this is how the universe is running. If you kept it up, this is what it would look like. John Martineau's Little Book of Coincidence is where you would find this information, and he's an amazing British geometer. So when we're working with the body, even in stretch class, it's not, as I said, it's not so much about stretching, it's about relaxing. It's about finding this neural zone. We think a lot on the surface, even touching the body or working with the body or relating to pains that we have. It's like you've got a pain in your shoulder, or you've got a pain in your hip, and you think it's deep what you're talking about. But what's deepest are your organ systems. And in acupuncture, we're taught this thing that we regurgitate on exams, that the 10,000 diseases arise from the hara. And what that means is that the multitude of illness comes from your organ systems. And so what I see in the body is that everything within the body is where the tensions begin. They're like little saran wrap pulls. And by getting more in touch with our sensory system, we can begin to determine not just muscular, my neck hurts pain, but like where the actual pull is coming from. And that's what we're going to explore in this right now. First, I'm going to just say, somebody made a comment. There was a question about heart and brain. If I can find that quickly, that was interesting. But it was around heart and brain connection. Where is that? No, I can't even find it right now. But the idea that the heart and brain, yes, has a connection, but there's 3 dantian in the body. And a lot of us are familiar with the lower dantian, but don't recognize that there's 3. And in our world, we're talking a lot about the brain and the heart. And of course, the Heart Math Institute has come out with a lot of really interesting information about heart frequency and what we know about how far the field of that frequency moves beyond our body. And yet we're still not talking about our sex, which has been around as the trinity. Again, we're back to the triangle idea, or the trinity of the body. In these old ancient, and interesting that the generative center is used with this hexagon here, because you'll see that in exactly the geometries that I found within the nervous system. So I think that it says a lot that we focus so much on the brain, and then we talked about the heart. Oh, you can't see the slides I'm on? Huh. That's kind of important. Really? Can you see that? Can you see the three Trinity ones right now? I wish I could just screen my whole thing. No, you can't. Okay, great. Thank you.
I
Awesome.
can see everything.
Okay, great. Yeah, David just said he could too. So I think it's really interesting that we've got the brain that we've spent so much time on. And then we talk about the heart and how that's important, but we still haven't considered the generative center of the body. And this is why we're all here. Like my running joke is everyone is here because an orgasm happened, hopefully two, but at the very least one. And you would think that if we really wanted to know what life was like, and where it came from, that there would be a center for orgasm study in every city. But apparently that's still too avant-garde for our world. And that's crazy. So we're still focusing on brain, moving down to heart. Maybe one day we will recognize that this generative miracle that happens in the body that allows us to be here is part and parcel of this triple Dantian system that has been known for thousands of years. That's my little segue into that. There's also a trinity through the body of the Sanjiao. I'm not going to go through this a lot, but I'm just going to show you a little bit where the geometry starts to make sense. And I'm going to whip through this a little bit quickly. We've got three vertical lines that move through the body. Ida Pingal and Sushumna have been known for years. I did for thousands of years from Ayurvedic medicine. I did not know that when I felt three vertical lines moving through the body. And yet what they do is they are a spiral, because this is a perfect example of, are we looking at straight lines or are we looking at spirals? Now, when you get into the body, yes, we can look at it from lines. There's three lines here. If you want to show depth, you see more of an angle. And this was the first level of planes I started to feel when I was touching bodies, and particular angles when one's working on the body in order to be able to get into communicating with the nervous system. And what that tends to look like in the body is this, as a one-sided thing. And yet it's equally valid by looking at it from the other way around, which is giving us this same shape again, which we just looked at from the generative center of the body. Here's a fractal. It keeps moving out as we know it as Metatron's cube. What that looks like in the body is kind of like a double Kabbalic structure, really, because this turns into Kabbalic structure. And this is the shape that I found in the body. And it fits really beautifully into the vector equilibrium as a 3D shape representing a very different 3D shape. And I know I'm going really quickly, but just appreciate the pictures. This is where my logo came from. And you can see that this is the vector equilibrium, which is a very foundational way of understanding the 0-point field in physics, where all stillness is before the inhalation and life begins again. So as we're moving into that, you can see that that's also fractal. So we can't look at one thing and try to hold it in one place, because it still keeps fractalizing out. So if you can feel the center points, let's say, you can feel a level on your body, imagine all these different points that you can feel outside and around your body. And so for me, the way of bridging the conscious and subconscious mind is going into the body and finding these neural zones, as I call them, where you can move the body to where it's comfortable, to relax it into stillness, and sensation rises up to meet you. And there is a myriad of information in all of that in this. This starts to form a geometric idea. Now, when people say, how can I work on this on myself? This I go into a lot in level 2 through using somatic stretch. So let's just talk about these points for a moment. Here, creative center to creative center. And yet, of course, it goes all the way up through the body, because this shape that I have so-called unearthed in looking at this is fractal in itself. So this is just one frozen fractal of a way to relate in our bodies. So let's say you have a nagging shoulder pain, or your neck hurts, or you've got that nagging pain behind your shoulder blade. We're so used to thinking on the surface that we're not realizing that the pull started deep inside the body. It started in the organ system. This actually relates deep into the middle of the lung. And I have a lot to say about that in relation to cancer and different research that I've seen, even just from friends or clients having cancers, and correlating a lot of interesting things. These relate to your digestive organs, and this relates to the lower left and right quadrant of your abdomen. Your hip pain comes from these points in here. It doesn't just come from even a tight piriformis, which is deep, deep in your hip. So the whole way to understand how to really unwind tension is to unwind it from the center. That's my short version of all of that. Ultimately, what we're looking at is light refraction. And this is this is literally a picture of light refraction by Clay Taylor. And you can find his work at the artofclaytaylor.com. And you can see, I love this because you can see 3 vertical lines. You can see all these different planes of energy. You can see circles, lines, and connection points that move outside the immediate scope of what one can see. And that is essentially, when I was thinking that it was just neural impulses I was looking at, I realized that in fact, what it was is me looking at just the nervous system actually refracting light. And because we don't know a lot about the miracle of light generally, it's a very new science in a lot of ways for us to be able to appreciate what are planes, what are our angles through the body, where are the intersection points, and how can we feel them? So my art of working with geometry is by using visuals, but more importantly, using our own bodies in order to be able to unlock deep tension patterns, create a synthesis between the left and right sides of the brain as your deeper wisdom speaks to your conscious mind. And in that way, unlock a lot of creativity and intuition. And the body has shown me this geometry. As I said, when I got into it, I didn't realize it was geometry. And that led, of course, to everything else, which is the toroidal field. Because around every proton, around every atom, around every living thing, there is this circular field. And yet we just looked at a bunch of different lines. So I think I stopped sharing my screen, did I? Yeah. So that was my little recording of that. I hope that was helpful. Yep, I covered pretty much what I wanted to in just a brief little thing there. So I don't know if there were any questions on that. I don't want to go too far over. We're almost at an hour and a half. But David, if there are maybe some questions that seem to come up in relation. I will just say that one of the questions was, when you talk about working to core, do you mean addressing the pain or issue from the place in the core of the body instead of the local area that is the pain? And that's what I was just trying to explain. When you have a pain up here or in the back of your shoulder, thinking inside and understanding these core points, you can really open up, and that will change the whole dynamic of pain syndromes. And when you're working on bodies, of course, then you have an ability to get into where the pain is, and it's often in a different place. The congestion is in a different place from where the pain is actually manifesting. So that's a whole different art of working on the body. And I do teach workshops in that when we're allowed to play in the world. Okay, so I'm just looking at some of the questions. I know, David, you've had a chance to look over these. So I don't know if there's one that you want to let me know about. If you do want to find out more about, oh, we do have a quick poll for you guys, actually. I'll just drop in my email here so that you can also get in touch with us directly. But Jonathan and I are talking about a couple of things. And David, if you want to share the poll there. Would you be interested in having a monthly talk on the macrocosm and microcosm? And are you interested in attending a sacred geometry online conference, which we're thinking of crafting? And would you be interested in a more in-depth course on the meridians in the human body, which is what I'm planning on launching in the fall, so that people who really want to know how to work on bodies as therapists, or who are really interested in the meridians, can dive in. So please do let us know the answer to that. That will allow us to really know what it is to offer you that you might be interested in. Jonathan, is there anything you want to share while that poll is polling?
Oh, yeah. There's, I didn't actually get a chance to finish answering one of those questions, and about do I have ways of experiencing these geometries? And I do. I have lots of ways, but that itself could take, a good chunk of another session. So I'm hoping actually that there's enough interest for us to continue giving these presentations. I've enjoyed it.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
also reminds me of one of the questions of, my work and how is it related to Nassim Haramein and what he's doing. Nassim, I first met Nassim back in the 90s somewhere. He had just arrived into Santa Cruz from Canada when he'd been living in the mountains in his van. and there he was. And I was giving a presentation at that time. I was giving a presentation in Mount Madonna, which is not too far from Santa Cruz. And I had posters around Santa Cruz where he lived, and he saw my poster. And on the poster I had the Sri Yantra. And that's what got his attention. And so he came to my first presentation. I didn't know who he was, but I gave this presentation to, the audience, and he was in the audience. I didn't know. And afterwards, I had a line of people wanting to talk to me after the show, and he was sitting to the side. I noticed this guy sitting very patiently. And so I got to the last person, and then he came up to me and we started talking. And like within a few minutes, it was like we had known. I'd known this guy. I'd known him all my life. We felt like we just knew each other, and that was the beginning. And that was in 19 something, 1980, 97 or 98 or something like that. And since that time, our friendship has been very strong. And he's a brother from another mother, as sometimes described. And and along the way, we have given presentations, co-presented. We did an Australian tour one time where he was, the main feature, and I was the opening act. And so we tried navigating, two dyslexics navigating their way through the streets of Sydney. I tell you, it's really quite a challenge. Anyway, we have been giving talks, over the years here and there, and he often has introduced me at other talks. Um, and and people come up to me afterwards and have said, I've been following Nassim's work for many years now, and now seeing your work presentation, it's really complemented what he's saying, because he comes from a hard physics, solid physics perspective, and I come from the philosophical, spiritual perspective, metaphysical perspective, but we meet in the same places. And from where I'm coming from, you get all the background to that. And where Nassim's coming from, you get all the background to that. And the people who have come up to me, fans of Nassim, said that my work has filled in missing pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, that our work is very complementary. And I feel the same way about with Meredith and her work and my work. It's very complementary. She's very focused on the physical form, the microcosm. I'm very focused on the microcosm as well, but from a different perspective, more from a consciousness and its connection to macrocosm and oneness and unity consciousness. And so I have to speak more about this on my website, Attuned to Consciousness. And I'm just in the process of starting back to the subject of what modalities do we have. Then I'm creating a new series of geometries that are particularly designed for how they respond under colored lights, because colored light actually, in my experience, activates the geometries. It brings in more dimensions of experience. It involves utilizing many more um, rods and cones in the eye to have a much deeper experience of the geometries. All of this information is going to be available on my website, so I won't go into the details of it. but it's the interaction between colored light and reflective light. And when the reflective light is geometry and the colored light is, just pure color, then it's very psychologically psychoactive, and it's a whole different experience of geometry. It takes you to a whole different place, but read more about that on my website. Back to you, Meredith.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so it seems like a lot of people in the poll, 97% are interested in having a monthly talk with Macrocosm and Microcosm.
Oh, good.
And 91% are interested in a sacred geometry online conference, and 89% are interested in a more in-depth course on meridians in the human body. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
In the meantime, there's lots to dive into. Somebody did comment that, oh, here we go. And David put the link out that Marshall Lefferts' book on cosmometry. I'm a huge fan of Marshall. Love him and his work. And that book is, I call him Buckminster Fuller of the 21st century.
I love his work as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
all kudos to Marshall and his work. And it would be lovely to have him on sometime.
Wouldn't it? Yeah.
Well, if
Yeah, we'll
it's
do
just a
that.
continuing thing, well, we could have guests, and Marshall will be
Yeah,
one of the guests. Yeah.
we'll do that. So there is a link there for his book, and I do encourage you to get that. And because we've had a good long number of months that both of our programs have been out, the Resonance Science Foundation are raising our prices just a little bit. So my level 1 is going up a little bit, and Jonathan's is going up a little bit. So that's going to be available for the next week at the same prices. So if you're interested in either of our programs, David, maybe, I think, did you just put out a link, or if you could put out those links again so people can just grab them easily. You can either go to my site at geometryofhealing.com. You can find everything on the Resonance Science Foundation and Jonathan's work and my work. And Jonathan's website is attunedtocosmos.com, and I am geometryofhealing.com. And it's really great. I will compile some of the other questions, but if you do have any other questions, please contact me directly. I put my email in there too, at sands, like SANDS, like the beach, at templebody.com, sands@templebody.com. Send me your questions, send me your interest, and that will help us kind of craft what we're doing and what we can offer through this wonderful platform. And I really want to thank the Resonance Science Foundation for all of the support in outreach and all the wonderful work that Nassim and everyone there is doing
Me
in order
too.
to,
Me too.
to
Yeah.
provide us to share. And thank you to all of you for your interest, because it's a lot of fun to be able to have a chance to talk about these things. So I
For
know there's a
sure.
lot of people with great ideas out there, really great thoughts. Please do send them, and we will follow up. And I think that's it. And come stretch. Come stretch. You can see it all at geometryofhealing.com. You can get into your body and you just feel good anyway. Yeah. And that's that. Anything you want to say, Jonathan?
I've really enjoyed this, and I'm so delighted that there's a strong request to continue this, because there's nothing I'd like more than to continue along this vein and explore all the possibilities, the endless possibilities of ways of sharing sacred geometry and the experience and utilization and so many other things that, yes, we can't fit everything into one session. So to have a continuing theme, then that's very exciting to me.
Yeah, and I appreciate the people who asked the questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them. We did want to try to keep it in an hour and a half, but I will compile them and hopefully we'll do it again. And you can, if you're on one of our mailing lists as well, you'll also receive information about that. So there's a lot of stuff in the links there. And thank you all, everyone, so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you, David, for being back there, helping out, doing everything.
Thank you, David.
Jonathan.
Thank you,
And
Meredith.
love to Australia and New Zealand over there and everyone.
Yes.
And till the next time.